The date is November 14, 1940. Inside RAF Fighter Command, a transmission arrives that drains the color from every officer's face. 500 German bombers are assembling over occupied France. Not scattered reconnaissance flights, a massive formation organizing with military precision. The message is unmistakable. Tonight isn't another probe. This is an execution mission. A British city has been marked for annihilation. Officers gather around the plotting board, watching coordinates update moment by moment. They can track the German force assembling. British radar technology, the same innovation that proved crucial during the Battle of Britain mere months earlier, functions flawlessly. The enemy's approach is visible. The timing is predictable. Yet knowing achieves nothing. These aircraft aren't relying on primitive navigation methods from the previous war. No starlight, no visible landmarks. They're being directed by something invisible and impossibly accurate. Radio transmissions slicing through weather, penetrating fog, bypassing every natural obstacle that should render night bombing impossible. The Germans call their guidance technology Nickebein, the crooked leg. Hitler himself has assured his commanders this system cannot be defeated. Meanwhile, in a modest Air Ministry office, a young physicist studies radio frequency data his commanders ordered him to disregard. Dr. R.V. Jones is barely 28. He possesses no significant military rank. Senior leadership dismisses his theories about German radio guidance as pure fantasy and resource waste. One air marshal recommended reassigning him to practical work. Nevertheless, Jones continues examining the numbers. Something emerges from those frequencies, a pattern invisible to everyone else. If his calculations are correct, if his impossible theory holds truth, he can expose Germany's entire bombing methodology. He simply needs someone willing to listen. Less than 6 hours remain before those bombers reach Britain. Understanding how one dismissed scientist prevented London's destruction requires stepping backward, back to Britain's complete isolation. When German aircraft ruled the sky, the summer of 1940 brings catastrophe. France collapses. The British Expeditionary Force barely escapes Dunkirk, abandoning tanks, guns, and any illusion of quick victory. Hitler's Wehrmacht dominates territory from Norway to Spain's border. Britain stands as the final obstacle, and most observers, including British generals, expect its fall before year's end. The Luftwaffe controls the airspace. German bombers strike British cities with terrifying consistency, initially targeting airfields and ports, then manufacturing centers, increasingly residential districts. The Blitz ignites, and British cities burn through endless nights. London, Liverpool, Birmingham, Southampton. Fires illuminate the darkness for miles. Each dawn reveals fresh devastation, fresh casualties, fresh sorrow. Yet something troubles intelligence officers who analyze emerging patterns. The bombing accuracy seems unnatural. This isn't the haphazard destruction of the Great War, where pilots manually dropped explosives hoping for impact. German aircraft are striking specific structures, specific intersections. They're delivering weapons through cloud cover that should make precision unattainable. One raid eliminated an aircraft engine factory while leaving residential streets 50 yards distant completely intact. Another destroyed a concealed munitions depot in forested terrain, invisible from above even during daylight. How? The question haunts RAF intelligence. German pilots cannot penetrate clouds. They cannot navigate using invisible landmarks. Yet their bombs strike intended targets with consistent accuracy. Night after endless night, city after city, something guides them, something Britain cannot perceive. Unless they discover it, unless they comprehend and neutralize it, the war is already finished. The answer involves technology so elegant it approaches simplicity, and so destructive it transformed warfare permanently. Nickebein operates on principles any radio enthusiast could grasp. Picture 2 radio transmitters positioned along France's coast, separated by substantial distances. Each transmitter projects a narrow radio beam across the English Channel toward Britain. These beams carry slightly different patterns. One transmits Morse dots, the other dashes. A German bomber pilot tunes his receiver to the Nickebein frequency and listens carefully. Hearing only dots means he's drifted left. Only dashes indicates drift to the right. But when positioned precisely on course, flying directly along the beam's center line, The dots and dashes merge into continuous tone, a steady signal confirming perfect alignment with his destination. The pilot requires no visual reference, no landmarks, no stars, not even a functioning compass. He follows the sound. The second beam intersects the first directly above the target. When the pilot's receiver detects that intersection, a distinct change in audio, he knows he's arrived. He releases his payload, in complete darkness, through impenetrable clouds, striking targets within 100 yards. German engineers had been perfecting this technology since 1938. They'd solved problems British scientists declared unsolvable. Radio waves travel in straight lines, yet Earth's surface curves. Theoretically, a beam transmitted from France shouldn't penetrate deep into Britain. It should shoot into space as the planet curves beneath it. The Germans discovered that specific atmospheric conditions cause radio waves to bend slightly, refracting along Earth's curvature. Not perfectly, but sufficiently. Enough to guide bombers from Calais to Coventry with surgical precision. Hitler expressed such confidence in Knickerbein that he reportedly told his air commanders the system was undetectable and unstoppable. Britain possessed radar, certainly. They could observe incoming bombers. But radar detected aircraft, not radio beams. The guidance system itself remained invisible. The Luftwaffe could strike any British target with accuracy defenders couldn't counter because they couldn't perceive the threat. At least, that's what Germany believed. Reginald Victor Jones never planned to become an intelligence officer. He aspired toward pure physics, academic research studying infrared radiation and publishing papers for scholarly citation. He'd earned his doctorate at Oxford by age 24, younger than most contemporaries, and his professors anticipated a quiet university career of research and teaching. Then war erupted. British intelligence recognized a critical gap. Military leadership understood conventional weapons and tactics. They didn't understand science. This new mechanized technological nightmare unfolding across Europe operated on scientific principles. Radar, radio communications, encryption, weapon systems that generals couldn't comprehend, much less counter. Britain required people who could think like scientists while acting like intelligence operatives. People who could examine technical data fragments and perceive the weapons being constructed. They recruited Jones. He'd written a doctoral paper about using infrared detection for aircraft spotting at night. Someone at the Air Ministry read it and thought, this young man approaches military problems the way we need people thinking about military problems. They brought him aboard in 1939, provided a tiny office, a meaningless title, and minimal resources. His assignment? Analyze whatever technical intelligence appeared and report anything significant. What appeared was mostly noise. Rumors, speculation, wild theories from pilots reporting strange lights or unusual sounds. But Jones dismissed nothing immediately. He documented everything, categorized, cross-referenced. Gradually, a pattern emerged from the chaos. Multiple unconnected sources mentioned radio beams. A captured German airman mentioned something about following the signal. A resistance contact in occupied Holland reported unusual radio transmitter construction near the coast. Technical analysis of a crashed German bomber revealed radio equipment tuned to unexplained frequencies. Jones assembled these fragments into a theory. The Germans, he concluded, had developed radio-based navigation guiding bombers to targets with unprecedented accuracy. The theory explained everything: the impossible precision of night attacks, the mysterious frequencies, the transmitter construction. He presented his findings to his superiors. They rejected him completely. Radio beams couldn't curve with Earth, they insisted. Every physicist understood that. The distances were too extreme. The technology didn't exist. Jones was an imaginative young man wasting everyone's time with fiction. One senior officer suggested, quite kindly, that perhaps Jones should pursue something more grounded in reality. Jones returned to his office. He didn't abandon his theory. He couldn't. The evidence kept accumulating, fragment by fragment. He was correct. He knew he was correct. But being correct means nothing if nobody listens. Then the Oslo report arrived. November 1939, a full year before Coventry. A package appeared at the British Embassy in Oslo, Norway. No return address. No identification. Inside was a handwritten document, 7 pages, from an anonymous German scientist. The document was extraordinary, describing in precise technical detail weapons programs German intelligence had completely concealed, radar developments, torpedo guidance, rocket research. And buried in page 3, paragraph 4, mentioned almost casually radio beam guidance for bomber navigation. British intelligence didn't know how to interpret the Oslo report. Most analysts suspected disinformation, a German trick sending British researchers chasing phantoms. The details seemed too comprehensive, too accurate, too conveniently delivered. It had to be deception. Jones disagreed. He read the Oslo report as a physicist, not a spy. The technical specifications aligned consistently. The science was sound. Whoever wrote this document understood German engineering at expert level and was taking enormous personal risk to share it. This wasn't disinformation. This was warning. He filed the Oslo report with his other evidence. The fragments were solidifying. Nicobine was real. The radio beams existed. And the Oslo report mentioned something else, something Jones underlined repeatedly. A second guidance system, more advanced than Nicobine, used exclusively by elite bomber squadrons for critical targets. He'd need that detail soon, much sooner than expected. November 14, 1940. The intelligence intercept arrives at 3 p.m. German radio traffic suggests a massive bombing operation scheduled for tonight. Target, unidentified. But the scale is unprecedented. Every available bomber in Luftwaffe 3 is mobilizing. This isn't a raid. This is obliteration. Jones reads the intercept and feels his pulse accelerate. 500 bombers, guided by radio beams he's been tracking for months, approaching a British city unknowingly marked for destruction. He's spent a year gathering evidence, a year being dismissed, a year watching bombs fall with impossible accuracy while his superiors insisted the guidance system didn't exist. Not tonight. Tonight he proves it. Or tonight he fails, and a city burns. He requires equipment, specifically a modified radio receiver capable of detecting transmissions in the frequency range he's identified from crashed bomber components. The military possesses this equipment. They've refused to allocate it to his fantasy project 3 times. But Jones knows an RAF signals officer who owes him consideration. A man who's read Jones's reports and quietly believes he might be correct. Jones makes the call. The signals officer hesitates. Lending equipment without authorization could destroy his career. But Jones presses. "Give me 1 night," he says. "If I'm wrong, report me yourself. Court-martial me. I'll accept full responsibility. But if I'm right, if those beams exist, we can save that city." Silence. Then, "I'll have a truck waiting at 6. At 6 p.m., as darkness settles over southern England, Jones climbs into a modified signals truck equipped with radio detection equipment. The driver asks no questions. They drive toward the coast, toward the point where Jones calculates any guidance beam from France would first reach British territory. The bombers are forming over France. In approximately 6 hours, they'll cross the channel. Jones has until then to locate an invisible beam that 3 senior RAF officers have sworn doesn't exist. The truck bounces along blacked-out roads. Jones huddles over the radio equipment, scanning frequencies. Static. Noise. The empty electromagnetic hiss that seems determined to prove his superiors right. Hours pass. His hands grow numb. His confidence wavers. What if they're right? What if the patterns he's observed are coincidence? What if he's wasted a year pursuing a theory existing only in his imagination? The corporal glances back nervously. "Sir, finding anything?" Jones doesn't respond. He adjusts the frequency dial slowly. 30 megahertz, 31, 31.5. Then he hears it. Not static, not noise. A tone, steady, structured, directional. A continuous signal at exactly 31.5 megahertz, originating from the southeast, from France. Jones's hands shake as he triangulates. The beam is real. It's pointing northwest, directly into England's heart, directly toward, he checks his maps, directly toward Coventry. "Turn around," he tells the corporal. "Get me back to London, now." The bombers are airborne. Jones has found the beam. But finding it isn't sufficient. He needs to reach someone with authority to act, Someone who will finally listen. He has 3 hours, perhaps less. And a city's future depends on whether anyone believes the crazy young physicist who's been right all along. The truck races through dark English countryside. No headlights, no street lamps, just pale moonlight and a driver who knows these roads instinctively. Jones sits in back, clutching his notes, running calculations mentally. The beam is real. He's found it. But the bombers are already airborne and Coventry doesn't know what's approaching. The journey takes nearly 2 hours. 2 hours of darkness and silence and Jones rehearsing his presentation. How do you convince generals who've dismissed you for a year that everything they believed was wrong? How do you explain radio physics to men trained in conventional warfare? He arrives at the Air Ministry shortly after 10 p.m. The building is chaos. Officers rush through corridors with maps and reports. Telephones ring continuously. Everyone knows the raid is coming. Nobody knows where it will strike. Jones pushes through crowds, searching for anyone with authority, anyone who might listen. He finds Wing Commander Charles Frank, one of few senior officers who's taken his research seriously. Frank looks exhausted. He's been coordinating radar tracking of the incoming bomber formation for hours, but he stops when he sees Jones's expression. You found something. The beam. Jones is breathless. It's real. 31.5 megahertz, broadcasting from near Cherbourg. I tracked it for 40 minutes. It's pointing directly at Coventry. Frank stares at him. You're certain? I heard it personally. Steady tone, consistent signal strength, exactly the characteristics I predicted. This explains their bombing accuracy. And right now, that beam is targeting Coventry's Cathedral District. Frank is silent briefly. Around them, chaos continues. Officers shouting, papers shuffling, distant air raid sirens beginning somewhere in the city. Then he decides. Come with me. There's someone you need to meet. The cabinet war rooms sit beneath Westminster streets, a concrete bunker maze where Britain's war leadership operates beyond German bombs' reach. Jones has never been inside. Junior scientific advisors don't receive invitations to the British government's nerve center. But tonight, Frank leads him through security checkpoints and down cramped staircases into the underground complex. The main conference room is smaller than Jones expected. A large table dominates the space, surrounded by chairs occupied by recognizable faces. Military chiefs, cabinet ministers, and at the table's head, cigar smoke curling around his unmistakable silhouette, Winston Churchill. The Prime Minister is mid-briefing about the incoming raid. Radar has tracked over 400 bombers crossing the channel in tight formation, heading northwest. Impact expected within 2 hours. But the target remains uncertain. The formation could split, could feint, could be approaching any of numerous industrial cities. Frank clears his throat. Prime Minister, this is Dr. R.V. Jones, Scientific Intelligence. He has information about the raid. Churchill's eyes fix on Jones. They're sharp, evaluating, tired, but absolutely present. Scientific Intelligence. You're the young man writing reports about German radio beams. Yes, sir. Reports that several of my air marshals have called fanciful speculation. Jones feels his throat tighten. Yes, sir. They were wrong. A murmur ripples through the room. Junior staff don't contradict air marshals before the Prime Minister, but Churchill's expression doesn't change. If anything, there's a flicker of interest. Explain. Jones steps forward. His voice is steady now, the scientist displacing the nervous young man. He describes Nicobine, the intersecting beams, the elegant guidance system. He explains how Germans solved the curvature problem, how atmospheric refraction extends the beam's range beyond theoretical limits. He describes evidence gathered over months, crashed bomber components, prisoner interrogations, the Oslo report. Then he describes what he heard tonight. The steady tone at 31.5 megahertz, the beam pointing directly at Coventry. The target is Coventry, Jones concludes. I'm certain. The Germans are guiding bombers with radio signals we can detect, which means we can disrupt them. Silence. The room processes what they've heard. Then one of the air marshals, a man who'd personally rejected Jones's equipment requests, speaks up. With respect, Prime Minister, this is the same theory Dr. Jones has been promoting for months. The physics are questionable at best. We cannot redirect defensive resources based on... The physics are sound. Jones interrupts him. He knows he's crossing boundaries, but he doesn't care. Not tonight. I've tracked the beam myself. It exists. It's real. And in approximately 90 minutes, it's going to guide 500 bombers directly to Coventry city center. Churchill holds up a hand, silencing the room. His eyes haven't left Jones. Dr. Jones, if these beams exist, can we stop them? We can interfere with them, sir. Transmit countersignals on identical frequencies. Create false beams that confuse their navigators. Make them believe they're on course when they're actually drifting off target. It won't stop the raid, but it could reduce accuracy significantly. Make them drop bombs on empty fields instead of factories. How quickly can this be implemented? Jones hesitates. Not tonight, sir. We'd need transmitting equipment positioned along the beam path. Engineers to calibrate countersignals. Time we don't have. Churchill nods slowly. He looks around the table at his military chiefs, his cabinet ministers, the men who've been dismissing Jones's theories for a year. Gentlemen, it appears our young physicist has been right all along, and we have been dangerously wrong. He turns back to Jones. Dr. Jones, you have my full authority. Whatever resources you need, whatever equipment, whatever personnel. Find me these beams, then bend them. Coventry burns that night. The German bombers, guided by Nicobine beams nobody could disrupt in time, devastate the city center. The medieval cathedral, standing 500 years, is reduced to a hollow shell. Over 500 civilians die. Thousands more are wounded or homeless. The term "coventrated" enters German vocabulary, a verb meaning to utterly destroy. Jones watches reports arrive from his office, sick with frustration. He was right. He proved he was right. And it didn't matter. The warning came too late, countermeasures didn't exist yet, and people died because nobody listened until bombs were already falling. But Churchill listened. And everything changes now. Within 48 hours, Jones has resources unimaginable a week earlier. Engineers, equipment, funding, a dedicated team of scientists and technicians reporting directly to him. Their mission: understand the German beam system completely and develop countermeasures to defeat it. They call the operation Headache. The name is Churchill's idea, a small joke about giving Germans something to worry about. The concept is elegant in simplicity. Nicobine beams operate on specific frequencies. If British transmitters broadcast interfering signals on those same frequencies, German navigators will hear corrupted audio. The steady tone indicating they're on course will dissolve into static and confusion. Their dots and dashes will blend unpredictably. They'll drift off course without realizing it, trusting instruments that are lying to them. The first jamming stations go operational within 2 weeks. They're crude, hastily modified radio transmitters positioned along the southern coast, but they work. During the next major German raid, bomber accuracy drops measurably. Payloads that should have hit industrial targets land in residential areas or open countryside. Still devastating, still deadly, but dispersed, diluted. The precision that made Nicobine terrifying is degrading. Jones monitors results obsessively. Every raid is data. Every bomb pattern reveals something about German navigation and British countermeasures. He refines jamming signals, adjusts frequencies, repositions transmitters. The system improves weekly, but he knows this isn't sufficient. Germans will adapt. They'll change frequencies, modify equipment, develop new systems. Nicobine is just the beginning. To truly defeat the beams, Jones needs to understand everything Germans are planning. He needs to see their technology's future before they deploy it. He pulls out the Oslo report, reads it again for the 100th time. Page 3, paragraph 4. The anonymous German scientist mentioned a second guidance system, more advanced than Nicobine, used only by elite squadrons, X-Jurate, the X apparatus. Jones begins hunting. The X-Jurate system is Nicobine's sophisticated older brother. Where Nicobine uses 2 simple beams, X-Jurate employs multiple intersecting signals with complex timing relationships. The navigator doesn't just follow a tone. He tracks a sequence of audio cues telling him exactly how far he's traveled along the beam path. When specific cues align, he's over the target. The system is so precise it can guide bombs to within 30 yards of intended impact. Only one German squadron uses Excurat, Kampfgruppe 100, an elite pathfinder unit flying ahead of main bomber formations. Their job is marking targets with incendiary bombs, creating fires that guide following waves. If KG-100 hits accurately, the entire raid hits accurately. If KG-100 misses, the raid scatters. Jones realizes defeating Excurat is more important than jamming Nicobine. Nicobine guides the masses. Excurat guides the leaders, blind the pathfinders, and the whole formation loses its way. But Excurat is harder to jam. The multiple beams, complex timing, audio sequences, simple interference doesn't work. German navigators can filter out noise and still extract guidance signals. Jones needs a more sophisticated approach. He assembles a team of Britain's best radio engineers. They work 18-hour days, analyzing captured Excurat components, reverse engineering signal processing, designing countermeasures that can fool a system designed to resist fooling. The work is painstaking. Every failed experiment means another raid where KG-100 guides bombers to targets with devastating accuracy. Weeks pass. Months. Jones barely sleeps. He lives on tea and cigarettes and stubborn conviction that every problem has a solution. His team jokes he's becoming more machine than man, processing data, running calculations, always analyzing, never resting. He doesn't laugh. There isn't time for laughter. Every night he doesn't solve Excurat is a night British cities burn. Then, in early February 1941, they crack it. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected direction. One of Jones's engineers notices Excurat's timing signals have a subtle vulnerability. The system assumes its beams are reaching aircraft without interference. If you can delay one beam slightly, retransmit it a fraction of a second late, the navigator's timing calculations become corrupted. He thinks he's at one position when he's actually at another. His bombs fall early or late, missing targets by hundreds of yards. They call the countermeasure bromide. It requires precise coordination. British transmitters must detect incoming Excurat signals and rebroadcast them with carefully calculated delays. But it works in testing. Now Jones needs to prove it works in combat. February 19, 1941. Jones sits in the operations room at RAF Fighter Command, watching the plotting board. Intelligence indicates a major German raid tonight. Beam monitoring stations have detected Excurat transmissions pointing toward Birmingham. KG-100 will lead. Hundreds of bombers will follow. But tonight is different. Tonight, bromide stations are operational along the beam path. Tonight, British fighters have been positioned based on Jones's prediction of the German approach route. For the first time since war began, defenders know exactly where attackers will appear. The bombers come. Radar tracks them crossing the channel, right on schedule. Jones watches plots advance across the board. His hands are clenched so tight his knuckles ache. First reports come from Fighter Command. RAF Hurricanes, vectored to intercept coordinates Jones calculated from beam analysis, have made contact with the German formation. In darkness over the Midlands, British fighters are engaging bombers that didn't expect to be found. Planes fall from the sky. More reports. The Pathfinders, KG-100, are experiencing navigation problems. Their incendiaries land scattered across countryside instead of concentrated on target. Without accurate Pathfinder marking, the main bomber force disperses, dropping payloads haphazardly. Some hit Birmingham. Many hit nothing at all. By morning, results are clear. British fighters achieved their most successful night interceptions of the war. German bombing accuracy dropped by nearly 60% compared to similar raids. The Pathfinder system, the precision guidance that made the Luftwaffe so deadly, has been compromised. Jones allows himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The beams are no longer invisible. The guidance systems are no longer unbeatable. A year of being called crazy, of being dismissed and ignored, has led to this. British fighters waiting at exact coordinates for German bombers that thought they were invisible. But he doesn't celebrate long. Germans will notice their systems failing. They'll investigate. They'll adapt. This is a battle of minds, and it's only beginning. The morning after the Birmingham raid, something unusual happens at Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin. A report lands on General Hans Jeschonek's desk, chief of the German Air Staff. The numbers don't make sense. KG-100, the elite Pathfinder squadron, flew their mission exactly as planned. Their navigators followed X-Juret signals perfectly. Instruments showed them directly over target when they released incendiaries. Yet reconnaissance photographs from the following morning reveal their bombs fell scattered across farmland 3 miles east of Birmingham's industrial district. The main bomber force, following Pathfinder markers that weren't where they should have been, dropped hundreds of tons of explosives on sheep pastures and empty fields. Jeschonek demands explanations. The X-Juret engineers insist their equipment functioned flawlessly. The navigators swear they followed procedure. Everyone did everything right, and somehow everything went wrong. Germans begin investigating. They suspect equipment malfunction, perhaps atmospheric interference, maybe British jamming, though their experts insist X-Juret is too sophisticated to jam effectively. They run tests, check calibrations, analyze every component of the guidance system. They find nothing wrong. What they don't realize, what they won't fully understand until after the war, is that a 28-year-old British physicist has gotten inside their heads. Jones isn't just disrupting their beams, he's disrupting their confidence. Every mission that fails despite perfect procedure plants seeds of doubt. Every payload that misses despite flawless navigation makes German aircrew wonder if they can trust their instruments. The invisible war isn't just about radio frequencies. It's about psychology, and Jones is winning. Spring 1941. The beam war enters a new phase. British countermeasures have grown sophisticated. Headache stations jam nicobine across southern England. Bromide installations corrupt X-Juret timing signals. But Jones's most elegant weapon is something called meakening. The concept is beautifully simple. Instead of jamming German beams, which creates obvious interference navigators might notice, meakening stations receive guidance signals and rebroadcast them from different locations. The German navigator hears exactly what he expects. His instruments show him on course. Everything seems normal. But the signals he's following aren't coming from France anymore. They're coming from British transmitters positioned to lead him astray. Entire bomber formations follow false beams across English countryside, convinced they're approaching industrial targets. They drop payloads with precision and confidence. And in the morning, reconnaissance reveals they've demolished nothing but farmland. Craters dot empty fields. Incendiaries have burned hedgerows. Occasionally, confused farmers report explosions in their pastures, wondering what Germans could possibly have been aiming at. The psychological effect compounds with each failed mission. German aircrew begin reporting strange phenomena. Instruments that contradict each other, beams that seem to shift mid-flight, signals that disappear and reappear unpredictably. Some pilots describe ghosts in the radio, voices and tones that shouldn't exist, interference that seems almost intelligent. They don't know they're fighting a battle against British scientists. They think their technology is haunted. Interrogation reports from captured German airmen reveal growing paranoia. Navigators no longer trust their equipment completely. Pilots second-guess bombing coordinates. The mechanical confidence that made the Luftwaffe so effective is eroding mission by mission. Some crews begin relying on visual navigation whenever possible, preferring landmark uncertainty to radio signal treachery. Jones reads these interrogation transcripts with grim satisfaction. The beams haven't disappeared. German transmitters still broadcast across the channel every night. But the trust is gone. When a navigator can't be certain whether his instruments are telling truth, precision bombing becomes impossible. Jones has done something more profound than jamming signals. He's poisoned the relationship between German aircrew and their own technology. The beam war's lessons ripple outward through the rest of the conflict. When British planners develop deception operations for D-Day, they draw directly on Jones's methods. Operation Fortitude, the elaborate scheme to convince Germany that Allied invasion would target Calais instead of Normandy, uses many of the same principles. False signals, misdirection, exploiting the enemy's trust in their own intelligence systems. The ghost army that kept German divisions waiting at the wrong beaches owes its conceptual DNA to the ghost beams that led German bombers to empty fields. British anti-submarine warfare transforms using techniques Jones pioneered. The same signals intelligence that cracked German beam systems helps decode U-boat communications and track their movements across the Atlantic. The same analytical mindset, fragments assembled into patterns revealing strategies, guides the campaign that eventually breaks the submarine threat. Even Allied strategic bombing development incorporates lessons from the beam war. Understanding how Germany built precision guidance systems helps British and American planners develop their own. The electronic warfare capabilities Jones's team created defensively become offensive weapons, jamming German radar, confusing their air defenses, clearing paths for bomber formations. By war's end, electronic warfare has become a permanent feature of military strategy. The invisible spectrum, radio frequencies, radar bands, electronic signals, is now recognized as territory to be contested and controlled, as strategically important as physical terrain. Every major military power builds institutions dedicated to signals intelligence and electronic countermeasures. The discipline Jones essentially invented in his cramped Air Ministry office becomes a cornerstone of modern defense. Dr. R.V. Jones survives the war. He returns to academic life, becoming professor of natural philosophy at the University of Aberdeen. He teaches, researches, tries rebuilding normal existence after years of extraordinary circumstances. But the war never fully releases him. Government requests keep coming. Cold War intelligence challenges require his analytical gifts. He advises on Soviet technical capabilities, helps develop British radar systems, consults on projects he can never discuss publicly. In 1978, he finally tells his story. His book, Most Secret War, reveals for the first time the full scope of the Beam War and Britain's electronic intelligence operations. The book becomes a classic, still required reading for intelligence professionals decades later. When interviewers ask what drove him, how he maintained conviction when everyone dismissed him, how he found strength to keep working when pressure seemed unbearable, his answers are characteristically modest. "I simply refused to believe we couldn't outsmart them," he says in one interview. The Germans were clever, very clever, but they weren't gods. Their systems had weaknesses. Every system has weaknesses. You just have to find them. He dies in 1997, aged 86. By then, technologies he pioneered have evolved beyond recognition. Electronic warfare has become so sophisticated that modern militaries spend billions on systems to attack and defend the invisible spectrum. All of it traces back, in some form, to a 28-year-old physicist who heard a steady tone at 31.5 megahertz on a dark November night in 1940. Think about what could have happened. What would have happened if Jones had given up? If the dismissals and rejections had broken his conviction? If he'd accepted the expert consensus that German radio beams were fantasy? November 14, 1940, plays out differently. 500 bombers approach Coventry, guided by invisible beams nobody is looking for. They devastate the city, just as they did in our timeline. But there's no Jones in the cabinet war room explaining what he's found. No Churchill ordering countermeasures. No headache or bromide or meekening. The next raid hits Birmingham with full precision. Then Manchester. Then Liverpool. Every industrial city in Britain falls under surgical bombardment. Factories producing Spitfires and tanks and ammunition are systematically eliminated. The production capacity allowing Britain to fight is steadily destroyed. Maybe Britain still survives. The Channel is a formidable barrier, and German invasion forces faced enormous logistical challenges. But the margin between survival and defeat narrows. American aid that eventually turns the tide arrives to a nation more battered, more depleted, less capable of fighting back. The war lasts longer. More people die. History pivots on the persistence of one young scientist who refused to stop believing he was right. That's the lesson buried in this story. Not that science wins wars, though it often does. Not that technology matters, though it always has. The lesson is simpler and harder. Sometimes the person who sees what everyone else misses is the only person who can save what everyone else takes for granted. Jones wasn't special because he was smarter than his colleagues. The senior officers who dismissed him weren't stupid. They were experienced professionals applying reasonable skepticism to extraordinary claims. Their mistake wasn't intellectual. It was imaginative. They couldn't conceive of technology that contradicted their assumptions about what was possible. Jones could. And that imaginative leap, backed by stubborn conviction and relentless work, changed everything. The outsiders who refused to quit, the voices dismissed as crazy, until events proved them right. History is shaped by these people more often than we admit. We build statues for generals and politicians. We should build more for the analysts and scientists and engineers who see threats nobody else perceives and fight battles nobody else understands. Dr. R.V. Jones saw invisible beams. And because he refused to stop looking, Britain survived to see victory. If you want to see how another underdog inventor changed the course of battle, a sergeant with no engineering degree who saved D-Day with scrap metal and a blowtorch, subscribe and hit the bell. That story drops next week. A broken tank. A crazy idea. 48 hours to build something that Eisenhower called the most important invention of the war. Trust me, it's even crazier than this one.